Welcome, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues, to the commencement of the US-Albania Transparency Academy. I am your moderator. My name is Andrew Maybrook from the U.S. Agency for International Development. And today we are joined by 6 honored panelists: Ambassador Yuri Kim, U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Albania; Mr. Brock Bierman, Assistant Administrator, USAID Bureau for Europe and Eurasia; Mrs. Adea Pirdeni, Deputy Minister of Justice for the Government of Albania; Ms. Jorida Tabaku, Member of the Presidency for the Democratic Party of Albania; and Mr. Paul Maassen, Chief of Country Support for the Open Government Partnership; and finally, Ms. Juela Hamati, former President of the European Democracy Youth Network. The goal of this event is to discuss what is being done in Albania to increase transparency, to explore ways that transparency could be improved, and finally discuss how we can come together to collectively expand accountability. As a quick overview for the next 90 minutes, the event today will start with a video focusing on youth and their voices. Our distinguished panelists will then have an opportunity to comment on the video and their perspectives on transparency and anti-corruption. This then will be followed by a question and answer session from you, the audience. The question and answer session will then be followed by what is called a word cloud activity with you, the audience. The event will be then concluded by a second short video and Assistant Administrator Bierman's closing thoughts. Before we begin, allow me just a couple housekeeping items. Please note that this event is being streamed live on the US-Albania Transparency Academy's Facebook page. Second, for those of you who wish to submit comments or questions, please use the Zoom chat function that you'll see there, and then just type your question in. If you have a question for a specific panelist, certainly type that in as well. Feel free to direct it to them. And finally, thank you for your understanding that you yourself would be muted for this session to avoid background noise. At this point, allow me to introduce Mr. Brock Bierman, Assistant Administrator, USAID. Actually, we have to hear.
Okay, can you hear me all right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andrew. And thanks to everyone who is joining us today. I see that there are nearly 200 people online, and that's a great sign of the interest and the importance of today's discussion. I want to also send out a special thanks to the Consortium for Elections and Political Processes for their organization of the kickoff today of this US-Albania Transparency Academy. And it's fitting that we're having this event on the opening of a new year, full of unlimited possibilities. But first, let me give you a little history and the genesis behind the Academy. In November 2019, former USAID Administrator Mark Meehan and I met with Prime Minister Edi Rama and his advisors to discuss USAID's evolving relationship with Albania. The Prime Minister commended USAID for decades of support of Albania and the special relationship we have. The Prime Minister emphasized that continued progress must be focused on a new level of partnership rather than the traditional development assistance. He specifically asked that USAID to help the citizens of Albania address corruption. He said, and I paraphrase, "We don't need the money. What we need is your know-how." It was agreed that in order to build on decades of successful partnership, Albania must confront corruption in all its forms. Corruption, unfortunately, is still the single most important issue that needs to be resolved in Albania. According to Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, Albania ranks 106 out of 180 on the index. These results will not help Albania realize its democratic aspirations. Equally troubling is a 2020 survey conducted by the National Democratic Institute. The survey found a high level of criticism for parliamentary transparency, with only 3 out of 10 Albanians saying that Parliament has operated transparently during the COVID-19 pandemic. It also found that the likelihood of voting has declined by 21% since 2016, reflecting a real lack of trust with government institutions and of opposition bodies. At the same time, this survey revealed that the people of Albania had a real desire for greater government transparency and for opportunities for citizens to meaningfully engage the democratic process. What stood out really to me clearly in this survey was how young people are thinking about democracy in Albania, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Juela later. During this survey, one of the respondents actually commented that she felt the voices throughout Albania were not being heard. The heart of all democracy is citizen participation. When people feel apathetic towards the process, corruption will flourish. Corruption feeds on itself. Transparency International describes the insidious cycle as corruption undermines democratic institutions, and in turn, those institutions are less able to help push back on corruption. I want to be clear that corruption is a problem everywhere, including the United States. We should be humble in our pronouncements that the United States have all the answers. We don't. We must continue working together with all our partners in Albania and around the world to tackle these challenges wherever they arise. Partnerships like the one we have forged with Albania over the last 3 decades make us stronger because we learn from them. Simply, it's impossible for us to completely solve corruption. It's always something that you have to be on the watch for and recognize the signs that create a fertile environment for a continued amount of corruption. Our partnership with Albania has led to a significant political and economic reforms over our relationship. As NATO members and EU candidate, Albania is on the path to greater self-reliance. Albania has advanced significantly on the journey, and having demonstrated its commitment and capacity to plan, finance, and implement solutions to its own development challenges, it has a very bright future. These achievements demonstrate that Albania is well positioned to take on more ownership of its development and help others who have not achieved the same level of success. Let me be clear, Albania has seen tremendous positive change, but there is still work to be done. And we are proud to have reached this turning point together and will continue to stand with Albania. Now let me just say a few words about the Academy itself. The Academy will take a comprehensive approach to corruption because it is multifaceted. Success will depend on a collaborative effort which brings together government institutions, the judiciary, the media, civil society, and the private sector. In short, the Academy will have the benefit of working across broad sectors throughout the entire country, whether it's public or private. This event is the first in a series of conversations about the shape and mission of that Academy. I'm excited to announce the launch of our Facebook page, which I understand is going to be dropped into the chat section. Over the coming months, Albanians from across the country and frankly around the world will be invited to participate in the process of defining the Academy's structure and the goals. It is every Albanian's responsibility to be engaged with this effort. As the planning for the Academy moves ahead, I want to be clear that corruption will not be easy to tackle, nor can it be completely eradicated. It is also a generational challenge. It requires the transformation of norms and the long-term engagement of all levels of society, from the next generation of leaders to the current decision makers. The Academy's success depends on the sustained commitment of all Albanians to address the complex nature of corruption throughout Albania, from bribes for public services and nepotism in the job hunt to the informal nature of much of Albania's economy. I hope this Academy will drive all Albanians, give all Albanians the opportunity to envision what corruption-free a country looks like. And more importantly, I hope it gives everyone an equal voice in making that vision a reality. I hope it will serve as an active space for exchange of ideas, a meeting place for those from different sectors of political process, members from civil society, students in the private sector. And I hope it will promote citizens' engagement in the democratic process by demonstrating that everyone has the ability to make a difference. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this session.
Thank you, Assistant Administrator Bierman. At this point, allow me to pass the microphone to Ambassador Yuri Kim. And Ambassador Kim, if you'd like to give a few comments, please.
Great, thank you very much. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. Brock, it's wonderful to see you again. And this is in many ways a very fitting cap to all that you have accomplished over the time that you have been in government service with USAID. So thank you very much. And I'm glad we have this opportunity to be on this panel together. You have given us some really wonderful insights into the Transparency Academy, and not only that, but on USAID's legacy in Albania. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, the challenges that lay ahead. So in short, I'd like to talk about why we're transitioning, how we're going to transition, and where we go from here. USAID can be proud of the significant contribution it has made to Albania's development over the last 30 years. We may be transitioning the nature of USAID's presence in Albania, but our commitment and our purpose remain as strong as ever. The US government and the people of the United States remain committed to a democratic, secure, and prosperous future for Albania. We're dedicated to an Albania that becomes a full member of the European community and nurtures a sense of optimism in its citizens about their future. As Albania strives towards that bright future, it must redouble its efforts to eradicate the single biggest obstacle in its way: corruption. Corruption and the perception of corruption continue to undermine the accomplishments and progress that have already been made. Albania has taken steps forward, but corruption weighs down each step. And indeed, corruption sometimes forces a step backwards. The answer to corruption is not only better and stronger laws, but a different culture and systematic impediments to corruption. Albania must be a place where corruption not only brings punishment and shame, but where it is harder and harder to perpetrate. This is where the Transparency Academy comes in. The Academy will enable and empower citizens to be aware of corruption, to develop the tools necessary to articulate their concerns, and to be capable of effectively demanding and tracking change from the government, from businesses, and from fellow citizens. The Academy will encourage public dialogue on accountability and bolster advocacy towards increased transparency. Undoubtedly, modifying habits and building public trust will take time, but this US-Albanian alliance will ensure that the technical resources and know-how are available for the long term. Although the Transparency Academy's doors have yet to be opened physically, today's kickoff lays a cornerstone, which is reinforced through your involvement. And I'm also very pleased to see how many participants we have on today's call. Because ultimately, the Transparency Academy is here, and most importantly, it is yours. This is not passive ownership. It requires active engagement and leadership. The United States expects and hopes that leaders from all corners of society will participate in this effort. And by yours, the fight against corruption in society needs to become a personal commitment for each and every one of you. And we will be with you at your side throughout this journey. This is the way forward. So today, I hope that you will allow me to ask for your continued commitment and your courage. The cornerstone has been laid, and we need to work together now to build the Academy so that it addresses Albania's problems effectively, so that it gives the next generation voice and opportunity. This new institution is our commitment to the future of Albania, and we look forward to working with you to make it more of a reality every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Kim. We hope that you, at this point, we'd like to have everyone enjoy a short 4-minute video on youth and their voices. So we'll let the administrators pass on and post the video at this point. Thank you.
Realizimi i një Shqipëri Popullsia e Shqipërisë është ndër më të rejat në Europë. Dhe të rinjtë shqiptarë po emigrojnë në nivelet e larta, me rreth 60% të tyre, të cilët konfirmojnë dëshirën për të zhvendosur jashtë. Me numrin e qytetarëve të rinj shqiptar në rrëmje, lind pyetja: pse? Ndërkohë që papunësia përbën një ndër faktorët kyç në vendimin e tyre për të lënë Shqipërinë, bazuar në hulumtimin e fondacionit Westminster për demokraci, të rinjtë evidentojnë korrupsionin si sfidën më të madhe të Shqipërisë. Përtej këtyre perceptimeve, të rinjtë shqiptarë janë të vendosur të prishin ciklin e korrupsionit, me qëndrime dhe eksperiencat e tyre që promovojnë praktika të mira të qeverisjes.
Korrupsioni është pjesë e jetës sonë të përditshme. Dhe pse ndonjëherë nuk jemi të ndërgjegjshëm për këtë fenomen, ne vazhdojmë të jetojmë me pasojat që ai sjell. Mund të jetë pjesë e jetës sonë, por ne nuk mund të lejojmë që ai të bëhet pjesë e kulturës sonë. Ndryshimi fillon nga unë dhe ti dhe ne së bashku. Unë do ta ngres zërin. A dëshiron të bashkohesh edhe ti me mua?
Me të rinjtë shqiptarë që po forcojnë zërin e tyre kolektiv dhe po sjellin ndryshim, ata mund sjellin një qeveri të hapur dhe të përgjegjshme në Shqipëri.
Së pari, është shumë e rëndësishme që ne, të rinjt, të jemi pjesë e proceseve vendimarrëse.
Dhe të përdorin mekanizmat të cilët janë në dispozicion që zëri i tyre të dëgjohet. Kur nuk jemi të kënaqur me praktikat korruptive, ne si të rinj do të jemi të parë që duhet të reagojmë.
Duke nisur nga shkolla, nga universiteti, nga klubet sportive, nga komuniteti, nga partitë politike dhe patjetër nga bizneset.
Le të shfrytëzojmë teknologjinë, aksesin e informacion dhe platformat e mediave sociale për të urrëtizuar dhe të krijuar aleanca.
Unë kam vendosur të jem pjesë e këtij ndryshimi.
Po ti do të bësh pjesë?
Bashkohu.
Mbasi jetova për 20 vite në SBA, mund të them që raporti shpirtëror që ke me vendlindjen tënde, sa vjen e rritet me kalimin e kohës. Për këtë arsye vendosa që të rikthehem në Shqipëri dhe të aplikoj këtu të gjithë eksperiencën time profesionale, duke u bërë pjesë e një organizate që si mision të saj ka përmirësimin e klimës së biznesit në Shqipëri. Shqipëria ka sfida unike, por në të njëjtën kohë ka edhe një potencial të lartë zhvillimi. Bëhu aktiv dhe sill ndryshimin që do doje të shihje.
Duke amplifikuar zërin e të rinjve në Shqipëri dhe duke ofruar burime dhe mjete për përfshirjen e tyre me qeverinë, sektorin privat dhe sistemin arsimor, të rinjtë shqiptarë mund të fuqizohen për të përmirësuar dhe bashkëpunuar në kërkim të Shqipërisë transparente dhe të përgjegjshme.
Thank you very much. We hope that you found the video interesting and inspiring. Following the video's theme, I'd like to ask the panelists a few questions for their input. Panelists, for you, during this question period and your response period, note that we have about 25 minutes for this session, if okay, to be relatively succinct with your responses, if it's okay. At this point, allow me to ask the first question of Ms. Hamati, Ms. Juela Hamati, as representative of youth here. Ms. Hamati, following the video, what do you recommend to further ensure that the voices of youth here in Albania can be heard and that they are motivated to speak out? What is your recommendation to other youth and those here on the panel?
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Ambassador Kim. I want to thank our very good friend, but also Assistant Administrator for Europe and Eurasia, Bierman, but also USAID and Mark Green and other allies and partners which have helped not only initiate, but also shape this initiative, which is, of course, very important to all of us. The thing is that what we can do is what Eden is actually trying to do. I have had the pleasure of leading European Democracy Youth Network, which is a youth network that includes young people who are active in politics, but also civil society. And one of the things we try to do in the network is empower each other in order for us to succeed and then implement the policies and improve the future of our country. So I would encourage every young person who doesn't want to leave the country, but instead wants to stay here and fight, to get involved, to get engaged, to try and not become part of this lifestyle, of this system that, let's say, is very normal right now, because corruption is something that we all know happens. It is something that happens in in the education system, in healthcare, in, I don't know, also public administration. So the problem here is that we see it as something normal, as with many other things that go wrong in our country that we see as something normal, like, for example, political polarization. Corruption is one of them. So I think that first of all, we need to realize that this normal system that it still exists nowadays is not normal. It should stop. And the reason why it should stop is for us, for young people, because young people are not only the first ones which suffer the consequences of corruption, but also the main beneficiaries, I think, of anti-corruption. So that's why I would encourage all of my generation to try and be active in civil society, in politics. It doesn't matter, but to try and hold stakeholders accountable.
Okay. Ms. Hamati, thank you very much for your thoughtful response. Much appreciated. For our next question, allow me to ask Deputy Minister Pirdeni, as corruption is often personal and affects families, how has corruption in Albania affected your life personally, your family and community? What are a couple examples that you can share that takes it to a personal level?
Well, first of all, Mr. Maybrook, allow me to thank you very much for this invitation. I am delighted to be part of such a distinguished panel, especially with having the participation of Her Excellency Ambassador Kim and also Mr. Bierman for putting forward such an interesting event in order to discuss issues of such importance for today's Albania, but also for Albania's future. And most importantly, I also avail of this opportunity to be thankful for the continuous dedication and commitment of the USAID towards multiplying our efforts in the fight against corruption. And in this case, I would like to, of course, reinstate the full support and the proactive engagement of the Ministry of Justice in its capacity as a national coordinator against corruption, for contributing step by step by shaping the future of the Transparency Academy. First of all, referring to your question, as it goes, of course, without saying that no country is immune to corruption, but for some countries and in some countries, corruption issues and corruptive practices are part of the everyday lives. And of course, as a citizen living in the country, and I might have been also in some circumstances or cases become aware of corruption practices. For example, just to give you a short example, I have a background in working in the academia for more than 12 years. And sometimes I could hear from students saying that they have been a victim of corruption, not only in many areas of their everyday lives, but most importantly, and also regrettably, also within higher education. And of course, as back then, as the professors, this highly concerned me, being part of that, of the community, which need to do more on that regard. But now, in the capacity of the Deputy Minister of Justice, this, let's say, this commitment is even more important. And in that regard, I would like to, of course, try to give you just a short, let's say, overview on what we consider as our main commitment towards trying to engage youth and youngsters in our efforts toward erasing accountability and also towards trying to have a better future in Albania. In that regard, as you can imagine, what we consider as trying to empower youth with regard to increase the accountability efforts that we, as the Ministry of Justice, in the capacity of the National Coordinator Against Corruption, but also the government of Albania is trying to do with the adoption of the anti-corruption action plan is trying to raise this sense of community responsibility towards different kinds of planned and very well thought awareness raising campaigns in order to try to tackle those areas where youngsters are mostly concerned and mostly affected with regard to corruption practices. On that regard, what we have trying to do is also jointly with the Ministry of Education, we're trying to build a very solid system of introducing in our high school curricula specific information and specific knowledge imparting with regard to how youngsters can and may be drive for change. As I think Juela also mentioned before, and what we I think gathered from the video, is that youngsters are somehow detangled or untangled from all those chains or any sort of strings that someone else might be attached. For example, someone might be employed and cannot, let's say, denounce their employees. But when it comes to a young person, a student, or even a young professional, that when they come into knowledge for specific corruption practices, then this is the kind of individual that we want to empower further on. On that regard, this is how we have tried to tailor our awareness raising campaigns towards youngsters, and with what we are trying to do continuously as well. Also, in that regard, I would like to put forward one very important thought. I consider, and I think the Ministry of Justice in that regard strongly consider that awareness raising campaigns alone are not sufficient. What we consider important is change from within, which means that we are simultaneously working very intensively towards building integrity-based governance in terms of trying to have a specific framework for each and every institution in the Republic of Albania, based on accountability and also integrity and transparency rules. We have mentioned, as you have mentioned before, rules and laws alone are not sufficient, but rules and laws provide a very solid basis in the fight against corruption. And from that on, we can move and be sure that the efforts towards bringing forward and implementing those rules is of course necessary. On that regard, and of course on that note, I think that institutional change is very important in order to accommodate and provide a welcoming environment for being responsive towards any kind of denunciation. As you've said before, if a youngster or a young person denounces a specific practice, that kind of denunciation will be useless unless the institution is very responsive and knows how to deal with that kind of practice, which means that we also are trying towards trying to raise the capacities of the institutions to work and to be more prone to be responsive towards these kind of practices. I think that we'll have the opportunity to elaborate on this topic further on, but lastly, I would like to conclude with the fact that I consider as pivotal toward this kind of engagement, our own, let's see, the strong leading by personal example. As many young leaders or many youngsters that are involved in today's Albania in any kind of capacity. Me, myself, I've also studied abroad for particular kind of amount of time. And I also had this kind of, let's say, challenging thought of coming back or staying or trying to stay abroad and, let's say, build a future elsewhere. Let's say that when having these kind of thoughts, one of the main things that comes into your mind is that, first of all, you tend to build your future where you think that your input will be most valuable and most appreciated. And in that regard, I think that for every youngster in Albania, for what we do as returnees in this country, I think that all of us, we can try to be a driving force for the fight against corruption, or even, let's say, providing just a humble personal contribution towards what we do believe is righteous and right, let's say, in this country. So this is what I wanted to let's say, try to impart as a let's say initial remark on your question.
Okay. Deputy Minister, thank you so much. We appreciate your comments and your perspectives. Truly appreciated. At this point, I think allow me to turn to Mr. Maassen. Mr. Maassen, I have a question for you, if it's okay. I'm kind of curious, given your perspective, not just here in Albania, but in other countries, what are a couple of best practices and lessons learned that you have cultivated from your experience elsewhere to successfully reduce corruption and increase transparency that, from your perspective, may be applicable here? That's a question for Mr. Maassen.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That's immediately a very interesting question, and allow me to build on the great examples and statistics and ideas that the Assistant Administrator shared, Ambassador, as well as Deputy Minister and Juela. If you look at the title of this session, right, youth, the voices of the future, right, and youth truly are the voices of the future. And let me start there before I come to the specifics of your question, because I think that's where the challenge sits. Yes, youth are the voices of the future, but policies and choices that define that future are made by people that are now in power, and those are not the youth, right? So the youth shares what they want, whether it's in a survey that we saw in the video, if you look last year at the climate marches, at Black Lives Matter marches, at the inequality, the social movements very often drive on the energy of youth. But the challenge is, how do you connect that energy and those ideas to the reality of bureaucracies and policymaking processes? I think that's the challenge we have. And there is a role there for governments in creating opportunities to engage with government, and the Deputy Minister was talking about that. There's also a role, I think, for civil society to help youth and youth voices bridge that divide between the future they want and the reality of actually influencing policy and government and changing the culture of government, as Ambassador Kim was saying. And that's the bread and butter of the Open Government Partnership, if you want. And now I'll come to your question of what have we learned the last decade, if you want, in the 78 countries that participate. The crux of fighting anti-corruption or opening up government, which is truly about changing the culture of government, if you want, and changing the DNA of government, is about dialogue and partnership. That's the crux of it. And then if you get that partnership idea and that dialogue and partnership idea right, then I think you can address corruption. You can address challenges with service delivery. You can address challenges in the justice system. Why? Because if you get it right, you tackle a couple of things that came up in the opening words of Brock as well as of the Ambassador, which is the challenges our society faced, which are not unique to Albania. It's anti-corruption, it's low trust in institutions, it's disengagement, it's dissatisfaction also what you get from government. And if you manage to tap into the strengths of other parts of society, you get access to the muscle and the brains of society, which will help you a lot if you're a government trying to tackle these very sticky issues. So when you talk about working together in consultation, and that's what I want to focus on, is how to get it right, because many of our partners at 78 countries don't get it right. Every country in the world by now consults and says they have ways and mechanisms to bring in citizens and respond to what they hear. But many get it wrong, and let me explain that. I think consulting is something else than communicating. Consulting means you have an issue as a government where you think you can get a better result if you open up, if you actually open up to what you hear, if you're willing to share a little bit of the power you hold, right, which is difficult. When you were looking for ideas, when you want technical input, when you need public buy-in for what you're trying to do, then you consult. And that, in our view, in our experience, is something you should do carefully and well designed. So I wouldn't advocate for constantly consulting with citizens about everything. I mean, citizens would go crazy. They would sort of not appreciate you asking them every day to participate. I mean, you know, Netflix is much more interesting. But if you do it on the things they really care about, and on the survey that you saw in the video, if you do it on education, if you do it on health, if you do it on the economy, then citizens and youth will come. If you design it in a way not to rubber stamp what you've already decided as a government, they will come. If you create platforms for citizens to oversee services and government to actually address, like the Deputy Minister said, citizens will do it. And part of it is using platforms that the youth uses. For example, Liberia, when they were creating their reform agenda around open government, they used WhatsApp and Facebook to understand what citizens and youth specifically wanted to do. Indonesia, when they created a mechanism to hear from citizens what they wanted government to do, what their complaints were, they specifically tasked a group of young civil servants to design it. Why? Because young civil servants, in the end, are the only ones that understand these platforms and tools that the same youth in society use. So you have to figure out a way that you create opportunities to participate on the issues that citizens care about, and you create opportunities to participate in a way that people will come. But you also have to do it in a way that it is a win for all involved. And I mean, I have a very good example that sort of shows how it's a win for government and a win for civil society and a win for the citizens. I'm happy to go to it, but I also know that I've been speaking for probably 5 minutes, Andrew. So perhaps I keep it for later in the conversation. But Ukraine does some really interesting work that shows that if you work together, it's better for everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Maassen. At this point, I'd like to, if you don't mind, to pass a question on to Ms. Tabaku, as you're here as a panelist. And actually, this question just came in from one of the audience members. We're going to do a Q&A, question and answer with the audience, but we thought we'd find this engaging. And it might be something that you can answer as well. It noted that there's an impression that people in Albania may not be comfortable relying on each other, and that may be one of the foundations of the problems. The question is, what would you recommend on how to increase trust with each other among community members? How to increase trust? And that's the question. If you'd like to answer, that's fine. If you'd like to answer another question or provide your comments, that's fine as well. But let me pass it on to you, Ms. Tabaku.
Thank you very much for having me here, Ambassador. Very pleased to be on this panel. It was a pleasure actually 1 year ago when we started the discussions with USAID and IRI on the Transparency Academy and on the results that this academy would have on corruption, concrete results needed for Albania, because we always speak about our European future and we speak about corruption as an issue, stopping our European future, but we have to understand that this is an issue which actually the cost of corruption is becoming an issue for our everyday life. First of all, let me say that I was very much inspired by the video that you broadcasted at the beginning. It made me believe that there is hope. Young, talented people who stay here in Albania, who invest here in Albania, and who think that independently of how the situation is, they want to change this country. Juela started with something, Ms. Hamati started with something which is true, that corruption is becoming normal. And because of corruption becoming normal and people speaking about it more frequently and accepting it, there is a lack of trust among Albanians. There is a lack of trust in Albanian institutions, and there is a lack of trust in terms of achieving concrete results in the fight against corruption. I see here a very distinguished panel of participants, of friends who have been together fighting for corruptive issues. Hi, Lori, how are you? Being together and speaking about these issues all the time. And I think that speaking about corruptive issues helps to spot corruption and to start fighting it. It has not prevented, in our case, Larry, I'm sorry, to stop it, but still we made a case with our battle for the theater to bring this to another level. So, of course, there is a lack of trust between Albanians in the system. And the lack of trust comes from the fact that everyone makes big promises about corruption and nothing happens. We do not see results. The lack of trust will be eliminated, and trust will be established when we see concrete results. When we see that for a corruptive issue that people speak about, there is something happening, that there is a politician involved, there is a decision from the justice system, that the system is working and no one is stopping people from being brought to justice independently of their position. And I believe that this lack of trust needs to be fought with examples, first of all, by setting mechanisms in place and by changing the whole system. The system can be changed by changing the culture, but by not accepting that corruption is normal. No one has to accept that corruption is normal, not even in Albania. I heard the deputy minister speak about corruption as an issue in all countries. It might be an issue in all countries, but Albanians are leaving the country. So we have to start and working for ourselves and make this a priority. Unless this becomes a priority and unless this is fought with examples, starting from top to bottom and making this a culture in the society, I don't think we will have concrete results. And last, I don't know for how many minutes I'm speaking, if I have also a minute left, political will. Political will, I believe, is the key in solving this. I know that everyone speaks. Words are so beautiful in fighting corruption. Everyone wants to fight corruption. But at the end of the day, as politicians, we are judged by deeds, not words, by facts, not words. So if we want to start and create a different culture in Albania, and the hope that I saw in the students in the first video that you presented, transformed into energy with young people who work in this country, who do not leave this country, who study in this country, I believe that we have to start providing facts to the young people that their involvement values. Every time I have the opportunity and every time I have the possibility, I try to involve young people in my everyday work. If someone has to be chosen for a job, I go for a woman first and then I go for a young second, because I believe that we have to promote these young people who bring a different point of view. I have been working myself in the public administration. Public administration changes you. When you first go in public administration, you go with energy, with enthusiasm. You see that you cannot change things and then you become less optimistic. We have to fight this. We have to make public administration the generator of change. And if we want to do this, we will do this by leading by example. There is no other way. Thank you.
Ms. Tabaku, thank you so much. Thank you for your thoughts and for your thoughtfulness. If you don't mind, just to conclude, I'd like to just get the impressions of Assistant Administrator Bierman, and then finally the Ambassador. Assistant Administrator Bierman, do you have any response or reactions to what you're hearing?
Well, first off, this is a great discussion, right? And I think you develop trust by having the discussion. But I also think that listening creates trust. And we need to step back and we need to listen to one another. And I think today it's extraordinarily difficult with all of the noise that we're hearing, whether it's from social media, 24-hour news cycle. The fact of the matter is there's so much information out there, it's creating a barrier. So it is going to help to stand back, and listen to each other. Secondly, creating that safe space, if you will, at the academy will create that ability to have that discussion. Paul, you mentioned, during your points about having that dialogue. That's going to be incredibly important. What's incredibly important as well is going to have that space where we're actually bringing everyone in. We're allowing them, no matter what sector and whatever their interest is, whether it's education, judiciary, economic development, the bottom line is we're including people from every segment, whether they're young or whether they're old. The fact is, whether they're from the private sector, whether they're from the government sector. And I also wanted to make a final quick point. Look, we talked about this in November of 2019, and here we are in January of 2021. So we're not doing this in a box. We haven't rushed it. And you absolutely are spot on when you say we've got to get this right. And if we get this right, this could be a catalyst that moves beyond and works beyond Albania's borders. Because corruption, again, as I mentioned earlier, isn't just isolated to Albania, right? So corruption is systemic around the world and needs to be discussed. And we need to put people together in a room and have that dialogue. It's been very, very gratifying over the course of the last 14 months now, and I think about it since November, to dialogue that we've had just internally. The great work that our staff has done in Albania and the embassy and the ambassador's personal engagement in this has been tremendous, but also just being able to talk to Juela, members of parliament, the government. There has been a vibrant discussion, and our implementing partners are going to do a great job in making sure that we listen as we move ahead, because that's how we're going to accomplish our goals. Thanks.
Assistant Administrator Bierman, thank you so much. If you don't mind, before we go on to audience-specific questions and answers, Ambassador Kim, based on what you're hearing, do you have any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's very important for to not lose hope, because I think the most potent weapon that tyrants have is to make you lose hope, to make you believe that things have always been terrible and that they will always be terrible. And therefore you just have to accommodate and live this way. And it's the same with corruption, right? It's been normalized as though this is the way Albania has always been, and this is the way Albania will always be. And so your choice is either to accommodate corruption or to leave. And that's what I see when I see young people leaving. They're choosing to say, I don't have hope here, but I can have hope elsewhere. And I think the major mission of the Academy ought to be to keep the flames of hope burning and burning brighter than ever. But beyond finding comfort and solidarity with like-minded individuals, the Academy has to be about action. It can't just be about, boy, we don't like corruption. It's got to be about identifying the technical means to make corruption more difficult. So things like putting records and processes online so that everybody can see exactly what's going in and what's coming out and who is handling what in between. I think, when you start putting processes that way, able to be monitored by everybody, it's great. The second point, or actually the third point that I'd like to make is, I know we often talk about the future and leaders of the future. And I would like to point out that many of the people who are in this discussion, including some of our panelists, are not leaders of the future. You are leaders now. So I think that puts extra onus on all of us to take responsibility and to take action. You will have more leadership in the future, but this is not a horizon of leadership that always remains off in the distance. We're here now. So I'm really excited for the Academy to be launched. I'm looking forward to working with all of you to do some serious, brutal assessing and thinking, and doing the hard work, because it will not be easy. It's gonna be hard. And if anybody tells you it's gonna be easy, I don't think anybody on this call would claim that. But anybody who thinks it's gonna be easy is in for a surprise. But I look around, I look at the list of participants, and it's quite an impressive list. Many familiar names, covering quite a wide range. You know, we have the chief of SPAC, Arben Kraya, on this call, as well as activist and academic Amy Laurie here, and everybody in between. So this is a great group, and it speaks well to the potential for joint action and actual results. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Kim, thank you. At this point, we have a special guest. It's Ambassador Florian Faber, who has joined us, and we're very pleased that you're able to join us. And she would like to just make a couple comments and have a couple responses. So if, hopefully we can get her on and unmute her. But Ambassador Faber, if you don't mind to come on, that would be great. I'll give our technical people about 10 seconds to see if she can get on. 1 second, please.
I think I'm on now. Thank you. It's thank you very much. It's such a great pleasure to see all this interest on talking on the Transparency Academy, a project which in Washington we have been talking for a long time now, over a year. And I thought to just bring a little bit of perspective on how this, the concept of this project developed. And I want to thank Brock and Ambassador Kim for being extremely supportive to this project all along. But when we had the visit of Administrator of USAID Green in Albania, he had a meeting with our Prime Minister, and this is where the idea started, and it was developed in their next meeting in February here in Washington. The idea of having a Transparency Academy and also a process in itself came especially after the earthquake in Albania, after the earthquake in September, and then the big one in November. We were just before the conference of donors, and we did not have an expectation what exactly would be in that conference, but the discussion on how the money that comes in Albania or in a country that has natural disasters might be a big question. Agencies like USAID would like to help countries, but how they work with governments. So Prime Minister Rama proposed, what about having something that then was called Transparency Academy, that will be a system that transparently will look all at the projects and the money that comes in, how that's spent, and make it available to the public. I have been a number of events with Ambassador Green here in DC last January and February, where I was pointed like she's the ambassador of Albania, because he put that project so much in focus, not only as a good project for Albania, but also to use it as example in the region and in other countries where natural disasters happen, earthquakes and other kinds. And there are a lot of funds coming in, and how it's the transparent way to use, not only how the money is used, but everyone knows how that has happened. Now, this process, of course, is transformed, is made more specific to Albania. We are, I also see a number of people who have been working for like 20 years on the transparency project and initiatives, and trying to involve different NGOs, levels of the government. And we see here mainly young people, and I believe this is an absolutely great start, because this is the young people that needs to not only trust the system and trust the country, but they have to look their own country as their first opportunity to live and study and work and stay with families, instead of putting an easy step and saying, if it doesn't work here, I'm going somewhere else. So really, I believe this is a great step that we're discussing publicly and with a lot of players. I see it's over 200 people participating. That's not an easy participation in online events here in Washington, DC. So congratulations for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much that this project has already started. My belief from what I've seen is that at least it's going to be a year or a year and a half until we see the Transparency Academy up and running and in the process. But I believe we're all happy and open to support the project and look forward to working on this project. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Faber, thank you very much. Thank you for joining and thank you for your thoughts. At this point, for the next few minutes, we'd like to invite the guest to provide some questions. We have collected quite a few questions, and I'm going to pick a couple. And I know that as somebody who has provided questions in the past, this could be frustrating if your question is not picked. Yet, it's not in vain if you write something in the chat box. The reason is we're going to post your questions on our Facebook page, giving others a chance to see them and a chance to respond. Remember, our Facebook page, we want to use as an interactive tool, a valuable tool to share information and to have individuals communicate to each other. So again, I'm going to pull out a couple questions, and I have a couple questions for individuals on the panel. But at the same time, if your question is not picked, we will be sure to put it on our Facebook page. Yet the first question, actually allow me to go back to a representative of youth, Ms. Hamati. Hopefully, Ms. Hamati, you're there. I'm not surprising you by catching you too quickly, but the question is this. What do you think, from your perspective, what can parents and teachers do to inspire and actually teach children here in Albania about anti-corruption and transparency? Lessons perhaps that the youth can carry into their adulthood. What is the responsibility of teachers and parents, and what can they teach? What would you advise teachers and parents? So that's a question for Ms. Hamati.
Okay, thank you. So so this is actually a very good question. As I heard from other participants, before saying that we should lead by example, I think that's what every individual should do. And teachers and parents included should lead by example. The thing is that from my perception, from the story, from situations I've heard or I've been part of, it's not usually the young people who corrupt or who bribe someone. It's usually the older members of a family which take care of this, process, let's say. So I would say that first thing we should do is talk about it and discuss it as something not normal, not tell it as a funny story, and or something that is considered as normal. And the thing is that since young people are not usually the ones who bribe, it could actually be an advantage also for the academy, because we are clean of this cancer. Let's say we're clean of being corrupted or corrupting. So I would say that again, us young people can be a very useful group to implement whatever the academy wants to implement, and very trustworthy too. And also, as other participants mentioned before, I think leading by example and not treating or talking about corruption as something abstract or normal or funny. It's not, it shouldn't happen. It happens, but it's wrong. We all know it happens, but it shouldn't happen anymore. I mean, it should stop, because it actually has a chain reaction. Because the thing with bribery or corruption is not that it ends there, with a person or in the sector or the field where someone is being corrupted or corrupting. It actually causes a chain reaction. If we have less hospitals now, if we have a bad healthcare system, if we don't receive, good service from public administration, if we have not enough schools, not good roads, it's because of corruption. So we are all missing, or we are lacking all of this because of it. So that's why it's not normal. That's why it should stop, so we can all have a better life quality. And I'm also very glad that you are focusing a lot on social media, with the academy, because we all know that young people are majority, of users are young people. So since, let's say, it's not like I have lost hope with older generations, but I think that the main focus, or the biggest hope I have, is that my generation, or young people in general, won't accept it or won't see this as something normal. So yeah, that's pretty useful.
Okay, Juela, Ms. Hamati, thank you so much, and we appreciate your thoughts again. And we'll certainly, please pay attention again to our Facebook page for responses and questions for you. We count on your participation as well. Our next question, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask to the Deputy Minister, Pirdeni. The question has to do with the private sector and companies. One of the questions that came in was, what can be the potential role of corporations, companies, and the private sectors here in Albania to help with the effort of anti-corruption and especially transparency? What is your opinion when you think of the private sector and corporations? Again, their role, their responsibility, their potential.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Maybrook. I think this very question comes to the very heart of one of the most important issues that we had to tackle in our everyday struggle for the fight against corruption. What we have, let's say, tried to analyze throughout these years is that well, companies or even enterprises now, as big as they can get, they have more and more compliance procedures and rules which are in place. And for example, just to give you a short example, what we have done very recently, the Ministry of Justice has very recently adopted its own integrity plan. And the integrity plan, as a matter of fact, is an instrument which have been evolved and have been designed within the private sector, which means that, as we know, the private sector tends to be way more effective, tends to be way more to, let's say, but also it's also somehow, since it is profit-based. But on the other side, what is also important, both in the private sector, but also in the public sector, is trying to impart the example of the fight against corruption, of building a culture of integrity through the leadership as well. And what we have done very recently is, and also what Minister Jonas is doing on a regular basis, is having what we call morning sessions with businesses in Albania. We've had in the last months two meetings, very interesting meetings with communities of the businesses, such as chambers of commerces, and we have exchanged opinions on how we can build a better understanding within what we need to tackle in terms of corruption. So we have started by bridging this gap between, for example, I just want to give you a short example on the fact that as the Ministry of Justice, on a regular basis, we usually didn't deal with much in terms of, we didn't have, as for example, in the Ministry of Economy, of Infrastructure and so on, have a very close cooperation with businesses. For us, since we have assumed that the capacity of the National Coordinator Against Corruption, we have taken very seriously on how we can impart a culture of, for example, compliance mechanisms that are actually applicable within the business sector, within our own internal administrative structures. And this is something that we have done until now with the Ministry of Justice, and we are trying to expand to the other ministries as well. But of course, within this kind of interaction, we've also try to explore how we can build a more sustainable relationship in order to somehow assist each other on what the needs are of the business community, how the business communities see their own role in trying to tackle corruption in the tax authorities or in the customs authorities, or any kind of problems that they might have which affect their own daily business. So this is, of course, a work in progress, and I think that both parts might be engaged into having not only a broader discussion, but bring real change into how we can increase the role of the business community on tackling corruption.
Okay, thank you very much, and we appreciate your response. As you can all guess, we want to keep the time limited. So I have two more questions, if you don't mind. One is for Ms. Tabaku. This is more or less your opinion. From your perspective, one of the questions that came in is, what type of feedback tools or methods, what else would you like to see so that communities, families, and private individuals actually have more of a say in some of the solutions? So again, what do you think could be a few additional opportunities or tools in order to maximize feedback from just any citizens? That's from Ms. Tabaku.
Thank you very much for giving the floor again. Just one comment on the previous question on corporations. I'm happy that on this panel, I think I saw Mr. Yace from the MCHAM, who did a great survey on what were the problems of businesses operating in Albania and problems of potential investors coming to Albania. Unfortunately and luckily, corruption was one of them. So corruption is, first of all, hindering activity of existing businesses in Albania. And secondly, we are missing on foreign direct investments. We are missing because the cost of corruption is stopping them to come to the country. They see international reports and they stop to invest in, they stop themselves from investing in Albania. And corruption is costing businesses today a lot. Businesses claim that they spend around 50% of their time dealing with inspectors, tax administrators, people from the government coming to them, time which is precious, it's money, especially for businesses. And Albania is missing on employment. We are missing on foreign direct investments from coming to Albania, and Albanian people and Albanian families are missing from real opportunities in employment. I'm happy that we finally have an agreement with US and some strategic investments will come in Albania as part of that agreement, but that only happened because of political will, and other investments is not happening because the political will is missing there. On mechanisms, what I can say about the existing system and how we can improve it. The Ministry of Justice is coordinator for the corruption in the government of Albania, which I think it's not applicable and it's not working. Why? They are just a line ministry. They are just a sector who are trying to coordinate all other sectors. There is not a cross-cutting philosophy of corruption working from top to bottom and believing that anti-corruption is fighting, is fought at all levels. The fact that the Ministry of Justice, who does not have to deal with businesses at all, itself meets businesses to discuss their problems, it's worrying for me. The Ministry of Justice, of course, can play a role to fight corruption in the prison system and whatever their line ministry is. I believe that we need to have a national coordinator for corruption, which is at the top political level and makes anti-corruption a priority of every government. As Ambassador Kim said, we are not only of the future, we are all leaders, political people who have decision-making powers also now. So if we want to start changing the system, we need to make this a system who involves everyone. Secondly, there are several mechanisms how families, individuals can be part of the system. If anti-corruption is at a political level, higher political level that is now, it's cross-cutting, it's coordinated, and if each of the system has its transparency tool in terms of making possible that everyone speaks about a corruptive issue, health care took the media and Facebook space the last 2 days. But if people could make cases about corruption in the health sector public through a tool that the Ministry of Health has, or through a specific system that encourages people who speak about this, I believe that there would be more transparency. In the school system, if the board of teachers with parents discuss about this issue and give inputs to the teacher community about the problems in the education sector, I believe that there's going to be more transparency and speak about examples and help to stop and prevent other examples. I'm just giving 2 cases who made the public news the last 2 days, but I believe that we should construct a system independently of who is in government that is solid, that does not change every 2 years, that is predictable, and that puts basis for a strong anti-corruption effort from bottom to top and showing political will. And again, I know that we are in an electoral campaign right now, and I don't want to make this a political debate, but still we have to deal with this issue now sooner than later, because the issue that businesses speak about it as a normal thing and citizens speak about it as a normal thing, it's hindering the life of millions of Albanians for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tabaku. As a final question, allow me to pass it back to Ambassador Kim. Just one final question that came in, and this actually came from a couple of individuals. And from your perspective as ambassador, and you have seen many projects throughout your years, initiatives, perhaps even versions of academies throughout the years. What would you like to see as a couple of the key or most important results of the Transparency Academy in 3 or 4 years? When you look back, what do you think will be a success for this?
I think that it would be good to have a healthy core of individuals who are participants in the program. I think that in and of itself is a result. And I say that because it's about changing norms and also about maintaining integrity. And as a few of our speakers have pointed out, it's not young people who are doing the bribing, but they may get the bribes. And this is the reality, huh? So I think it's important for people to be in the company of others who will hold them accountable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it would be good to see some concrete programs that facilitate and actualize transparency. So, for example, programs that already exist, but that could use acceleration or registration of property claims, and then resolution of them. And I'll just leave it there. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, because I think that's for participants to kind of scope out and figure out what's doable. But I think the idea of being with like-minded warriors, because this is, it's very much a battle that you're going to be waging, and holding each other accountable and keeping each other strong is going to be key.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Kim. Much appreciated. For our final activities, we have three more things. We have a quick exercise for everyone, followed by a very short video, and finally closing comments by Assistant Minister Bierman. At this point, we would like to do a real quick exercise. And actually, it's quite interesting. It's called a word cloud. And you'll see what there is we would like you to log in if you can. Hopefully, your computer won't shut down, or if you need to do it on your phone, into that site and use the code you see there. And this is in the spirit of often a single word or a single impression often means so much to individuals. So what we'd like to do is just take 2 minutes, and I'll keep the time, for you to go in and to type the word that it prompts you to type when you think of the word transparency. And we're going to see what is the collective response from everyone. So at this point, I will shut off my mic and let everyone to take, again, just take 2 minutes, 3 minutes of your time to do this, and we'll see the results. Thank you. We'll take 1 more minute with this. Okay, we can go on and on a little bit. Allow me just to hop back on. By the way, what we'll do is we'll post this on the Facebook page as well. But I think that what you had seen, which was very interesting, were at least a couple of the words that popped out. And again, these are people's first impressions, and first impressions count. And among the words that really stand out, among them were accountability and justice. And I think you'll find that quite interesting. Just something to think about is, again, it is a little bit of an exercise. And in many ways, you can see how much everyone agrees, or so many of us agree on these impressions and the words that matter. When you look at justice and accountability, there's always a how behind each of those as well. But at this point, we're going to, as we mentioned, post that on Facebook and allow you to make any comments on the Facebook page, as our Facebook page will be something that is interactive and something that is quite alive as well. But thank you very much for participating in that. Just so we can stay on schedule, at this point, we would like to have the second of our two videos, and to pass it on to the event administrator to please post a video, and that I think you'll find quite inspiring. It's all about commitment. So at this point, let's see the video.
Realizimi një Shqipërie më transparente dhe më të përgjegjshme kërkon aktivizimin e zërit qytetar dhe një qeveri që është e hapur dhe I përgjigjet qytetarëve të saj. Me qytetaria aktive dhe të përfshirë, mekanizmat e një qeverisje të mirë mund të zhvillohen nëpërmjet inovacione, teknologjisë civile dhe ndërmarrjeve mbi transparencë.
Unë bëj thirrje për më tepër transparencë, përgjegjshmëri dhe shërbime më të mira.
Unë bëj thirrje për transparencë, përgjegjshmëri dhe shërbime më të mira.
Unë bëj thirrje për transparencë, përgjegjshmëri dhe shërbime më të mira. Bashkohu edhe ti me ne.
Bashkohu edhe ti me ne.
Bashkohu edhe ti.
Okay, thank you very much. As you had seen from the video, actually, it was quite interesting. And believe me, we did not plan this in advance, that a couple of the words that came up from the individuals in the video were accountability. Also interesting was services. So actually, a lot of us are on the same page. These are universal thoughts that individuals have. Finally, allow us, now that we've come to the conclusion, I'd like to pass this to Assistant Administrator Bierman to deliver his closing remarks, explaining what is next with the Transparency Academy, launching a Facebook page, and any other thoughts that you may have. Assistant Administrator Bierman. Actually, you may have to unmute.
Yeah, I got it. All right. Can you hear me all right? Good. Well, first off, I would like to just briefly touch on what I think I'd like to see in 20 years from now. I'd like to see a strong, vibrant Transparency Academy. I think it's going to be a strong legacy, a strong partnership. And when I think about 20 years from now, I'd like to see a very robust Transparency Academy going, helping not just Albania, but also helping countries around the world learn from the examples that have occurred over that period of time. So I'm excited, and I'm extraordinarily hopeful. I also want to take an opportunity to thank all of you for joining us today. This is the beginning of a conversation, and a lively one, I'm sure. But I specifically want to mention our implementing partners, and I also want to take an opportunity to thank our mission staff, Michaela Meredith, who has been incredibly intricately involved with this. This has been a long discussion, and we greatly appreciate all of the dedicated staff out in the field. And I also want to mention that we've got people here on the line, Margot Ellis, who will be the incoming acting assistant administrator. As many of you know, I'll be transitioning out next week, but I'm extraordinarily proud of all of the work that we've done, the support from the embassy, Ambassador Kim's personal involvement in this. And I just want to assure everybody watching this that you have a partner, a robust partner in the United States, a friend, and we will remain a friend. And you've got our commitment to help you. I see on the phone Ambassador Sakuda, who I worked with in Azerbaijan when I first arrived, and facing corruption all over the region is something that's not just evident in Albania, but you have that commitment, and you can see from the people that are here today and participating with this conversation that it is strong and it is committed. Every Albanian should have the equal opportunity to inform what this academy will look like and what it will be. And I want to assure everyone listening that this will be a partnership again, not just the United States or USAID. This has to be a partnership between government, private sector, civil society, and ultimately the academy is yours. It belongs to you. And the only one that can make it successful are all Albanians and their participation. I'd like to close by saying how inspired I am by all of the people that have participated today, their commitment to make a change. And as I look about the participants and the panels, I'm impressed with the dedication and passion. So please stay tuned to the Academy's new Facebook page. You can participate in a national conversation and they'll post it now. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Assistant Mr. Bierman. At this point, let us conclude the event. Thank you everyone for attending. And again, as a final point, please visit the Facebook page. We look forward to your responses and the interaction on the page. Thank you for everyone for attending. Bye-bye.